Thank you, Emma. It's great to be with you all today. Ken, a U.S. veteran, has owned his home for more than 30 years. Until he partnered with our local Habitat for Humanity affiliate in Philadelphia, he chopped his own firewood to heat his home. Through a partnership with the Home Depot Foundation, the affiliate was able to install new windows and new energy-efficient heaters. Eager to see the impact of their work, affiliate leaders tracked his utility bills and were shocked to see an unusual uptick in usage. We don't usually tell stories about higher utility bills after helping families make energy-saving improvements to their homes, but this story is a clear indication of how transformational energy-efficient homes can be. Ken explained that because his home was warm, dry, and livable again, his young adult daughter had moved back home, and his brother moved in too. Imagine his joy in being able to share his blessings and create an inviting home environment that brought his family together. Audrey also lives in Philadelphia, and her story is one you might expect. She lives in the 100-year-old row house where she was born. The aging house suffered from factors common to older buildings, such as a lack of insulation and a broken water heater. But then, Habitat Philadelphia installed a new roof, added insulation, caulked windows and doors, cleaned air ducts, and installed a new water heater and stove. Audrey says the improvements have been a true blessing. Before her house was properly insulated, she got really cold in the winter. She's grateful that she no longer must run her furnace as much, or boil water in her kitchen and carry it upstairs for her bath. And she is certainly pleased that her utility bills are lower even in the hard winters. Her energy-efficient home made such a difference during last month's nor'easter and the freezing weather that followed. And an Ohio woman would sometimes turn on the gas stove and open the door just to feel some warmth, because the old farmhouse in which her family lived had no insulation in the walls. But when they moved into their new Habitat home in Marion, she went from paying $600 to $800 a month for utilities to around $100. Imagine having $6,000 or more a year for essentials like food, clothing, and medical bills. Think about, for the first time in your life, having a little money to save. Americans spend more than $275 billion annually on home energy. All of us know that residential energy efficiency offers untold potential for savings in housing costs, but it also leads to job creation, improvements in health and safety, and reduced carbon emissions. But often, the people who would benefit most from energy upgrades are least able to afford them. Families struggling to pay the bills often live in older homes that lack adequate insulation and energy-efficient appliances. Many times, they also have outdated heating and cooling systems that can contribute to health and safety issues. Consider these statistics. In order to pay energy costs, 21% of U.S. households reduce or forego food or medicine. 30% of households report energy insecurity, uncertainty about their ability to access or pay for basic utilities. Households with residents aged 65 or older see 22% of their housing costs go to basic utilities. The highest cost of utilities is for electricity, which accounts for almost 40% of total utility expenditures. Water accounts for 15%, and heating fuel 13%. The American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy projects that energy upgrades to existing housing units can alleviate 35% of the cost burden for low-income families. As I mentioned, however, too often these energy efficiency benefits do not reach the families who are struggling. More attention must be given to support the energy needs of distressed communities. The federal government has tried to address this challenge through effective programs such as the Weatherization Assistance Program, which has weatherized millions of homes occupied by low-income families. However, there's still a substantial need for more innovative approaches in the residential market to adequately address the energy needs of underserved families. We need more cutting-edge initiatives. At Habitat, we focus on utility costs as part of the overall expenses families must consider when purchasing a home. Energy costs can be a heavy burden for the low-income families that we serve. Households that earn below $40,000 annually typically spend between 10 and 15% of their income on energy, while other households spend on average just 4%. Habitat has recognized the importance of integrating energy efficiency into our work and has increased the efficiency and durability of our homes to ensure that families live in healthy environments. When we first began to look at using energy-efficient, sustainable construction techniques, we realized that it might increase the cost of building. Even for-profit builders were finding that a hard sell back then. But when we looked at the costs versus savings over time, we realized that it was in the best interest of homeowners to live in energy-efficient homes. Housing affordability is not just a matter of the cost of a mortgage. Reducing energy costs also reduces the overall and long-term costs of home ownership. Habitat was a pioneer in demonstrating that healthy, energy-efficient homes aren't only for the wealthy. We've partnered with thousands of families whose total cost of ownership is lower even if they pay a slightly higher mortgage. Habitat's low-energy homes also offer a financial buffer against rate increases. The benefits extend beyond just cost, though. Studies indicate that those living in homes with good ventilation are less likely to suffer from cardiac and pulmonary ailments that are aggravated by poor indoor air quality. And researchers in the United Kingdom found that mental health is also improved by the installation of energy-efficient measures in residential buildings, with tenants reporting that anxiety or depression fell by 50%. Investing in energy efficiency also elevates construction as a tool for equity and inclusion, ensuring that even low-income families can live in energy-efficient homes that save them money. Our affiliates employ a variety of energy-saving construction techniques. Building green in Houston means every home has continuous insulation, high-efficiency air conditioning units, radiant barrier roof decking that blocks heat from entering the attic, and non-toxic paints. Our Houston affiliate has constructed more than 766 Energy Star certified homes since joining the program in 2001. We build multifamily homes that incorporate green roofs in Philadelphia. Our Roaring Fork Valley affiliate in Colorado is part of a collaborative project to create a net zero community that generates as much electricity as it uses. Habitat builds single-family projects using gray water recycling in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and compact hot water distribution designs in San Joaquin County, California. We are learning to lower our construction carbon footprint through strategies like waste diversion in Denver, and we're using materials with lower global warming potential in Gunnison, Colorado. A valuable tool for measuring the impact of these efforts is the Home Energy Rating Systems Index. Over 1,000 Habitat homes have been issued a HERS rating since 2019. The average HERS index is 54, with several at or below 0. Some were as low as minus 32. And we've received national recognition for our work. Habitat affiliates in Denver, Nashville, and Houston were awarded the EPA's Energy Star Sustained Excellence Award in 2020. And our affiliates in Hartford, Sarasota, and Pioneer Valley were each awarded the Department of Energy's Housing Innovation Award in 2020. If nonprofits like Habitat for Humanity can make these strategies work, for-profit developers and the public sector can help find solutions as well. But it will take everyone working together on ideas like these. Make financing available to households at all income levels through social impact bonds and other financial tools. Expand public-private partnerships. Target energy efficiency in multifamily and public housing. Prepare low-income communities for disasters. Provide incentives for those purchasing energy-efficient homes. Support state programs to strengthen building codes. Encourage energy use disclosure to all homebuyers. RESNET's activities with Habitat are helping to grow solutions. We are very excited about your support of our recent Habitat House Design Contest. RESNET's Billy Giblin sat as an acting member on the panel of at-large judges who scored over 100 house plans submitted by Habitat affiliates from across the country. Awards included Best in Sustainability, Low Carbon Footprint, and Resiliency, among others, with the Santa Fe Habitat taking Design of the Year. We are grateful to ResNet for putting the time in to review so many excellent examples of Habitat's work. And many thanks for offering Habitat staff across the U.S. scholarships to attend this event. The work that ResNet is doing is essential to develop standards that everyone can understand and to advocate for the energy performance of homes. We will bring energy efficiency to everyone only through innovation, reform, and bipartisan support. By becoming an advocate for low-income families and affordable, sustainable housing, we can draw nearer to a world where everyone has a decent place to live. Thank you.
Jonathon, thank you so much for sharing those stories and the great impact that your organization has had on affordable housing and energy efficiency. Personally, Habitat for Humanity is near and dear to my heart. My mom, Chris Bennett, who has been working in the building performance industry for as long as I've been alive, was actually the first executive director of the Black Hills, South Dakota Habitat for Humanity affiliate. So I've grown up around Habitat homes and have always appreciated the great work that your organization has done for local communities as well as around the world.
Fantastic. Thank you, and thanks to her.
Absolutely. So before we get into affordability, I want to learn a little more about you. Tell us the unlikely career path that led you to your current position.
You know, my career never made any sense to me at the time, but I look back and all the pieces have actually been incredibly helpful for Habitat. I started out on Wall Street, actually, at Goldman Sachs, which was a great education, but I learned it wasn't the right fit for me. And then went off and had a transformational year coaching the Korean rowing team in preparation for the '88 Olympics and living in Seoul. Came back and went to business school, and then was really interested in growing companies. And I always had wanted to do something mission driven, but thought I could learn in the private sector and then bring those skills over to the nonprofit sector. And so started out with big companies like Marriott, Disney, Circuit City, and Best Buy. And I learned a little bit about the energy efficient appliance business at that stage. And then really felt that call to go into full-time service unexpectedly. That led to full-time church work, helping lead a large church. And then when I wasn't looking, was called 15 years ago to Habitat, which if I could have picked one thing that combined all the things I care about, it would have been Habitat. And I think the joy has been that all those things I learned about growing and starting businesses have been incredibly helpful in helping Habitat grow as well. But I can honestly say there's nothing else I'd rather be doing.
Absolutely. And it sounds like Habitat for Humanity is in great hands with your leadership. What would you say are the most rewarding aspects of your job as Habitat for Humanity's CEO?
You know, I think the joy moments, and of course, COVID is so frustrating for this, are when I get to go out and see the impact of our work. And so it's when I get to actually spend time with the families and spend time in the communities that we serve. I think that charge me up, fill my batteries, and get me fired up. And usually, again, in a non-COVID world, we usually do an annual build where I spend a week with President Carter and lots of other friends building somewhere in the world, and then often take a group of donors and usually one of my family members and do an international build. And those have been some of the highlights for me. But it's really seeing the impact on the families that is why we build, and that's what keeps me doing this work.
Wonderful. So what are some of the trends that you see in the next 5 years related to affordability?
You know, Emma, we have a crisis in affordability right now here in the US and around the world. And tragically, COVID has exacerbated the crisis because, especially in the single family market, we've seen lots and lots of people with means wanting to move out of apartments. And so usually in a recession, housing prices would go down. In this case, we have this K economy or less than economy where those of us with good jobs and knowledge work and assets have been inconvenienced but are doing fine. But for the other half of the economy, those in service jobs without decent housing and great instability, this has been a catastrophe. And so we've actually seen incomes going down and housing costs rising at the same time, which has exacerbated an existing housing supply problem. So I think, unfortunately, those trends are likely to continue without intervention. But I think what it will take is creative multi-sector sector approaches, first to increase the supply. So we need the public sector, the banks, the builders, the nonprofits, the community leaders to all come together and talk about how to meaningfully increase the supply. We also need to upgrade the quality of existing housing, and I think that's where RESNET plays such an important role, because as I shared in my comments, if we can increase energy efficiency, we actually lower the cost of living for that family. If you think about, for a family, the true cost of rent is their rent or mortgage plus their utilities, actually plus their cost to get to work. So if we can attack any of those pieces, that's going to help with affordability. I do think materials. When we started this energy efficiency work, there was a higher premium to build energy efficient housing. That premium's come down as the materials have gotten better and more accessible, and so it's become mainstream. I think that's a really positive trend. But the biggest challenge we're going to, I think, need to address is creating mixed income, mixed use communities where people can live closer to where they work, where they have access to communities of opportunity and jobs, and where they can live in healthy communities. And we need to attack that on all those fronts.
You mentioned that building energy efficient homes can help foster equity and inclusion. Could you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, and what I mean that is there's some of those things, like many aspects of inequity in our world and country, that we take for granted. And so when we think about it, I gave some of those statistics. Most of us pay 4% of our housing expenses on utilities, but for low-income families, they're paying 15 or 20% on utilities, and many of the programs didn't reach some of the highest need families. So when we think about equity inclusion, some of it goes to the idea of access, and so how do we make sure that all members of the community have access to energy efficient, healthy housing? Because we know that deep correlation between health and housing as well, and I shared some of that. But we see, and we've had health experts tell us over and over again, they get so frustrated because they'll treat the symptoms, but what they really want, as one of our housing friends said, she's a pediatrician, she said, I'd love to write a prescription for a healthy house, because otherwise you just keep treating the symptoms over and over again without getting to the root cause, which is families living in unhealthy housing. So the more we can improve the safety, healthiness, and energy efficiency of these homes, the more we're creating equitable access and really including all members of our communities.
You ended with several strategies that you feel are important for making energy efficient homes available to all. What specific housing policies need to be changed in order for this to happen?
It starts with funding. And so I think now Energy Star standards have gotten stronger and stronger. But now it's the question of how do we make sure that we can both upgrade the existing poor quality housing stock. We've been a heavy fan of a bipartisan bill for retrofitting and upgrading housing in distressed communities around the country. And one of the dilemmas there is that the cost of the upgrade won't be realized in the appraisal price, because we've got depressed pricing. And so this would help cover that gap, so that rather than just let that housing stock rot and fade away, we could turn it into good housing, which is part of that supply problem. We also believe that things like the weatherization program are really important. How do we have funding to continue to upgrade and increase the quality of housing? Because we think both preserving as well as building affordable housing is a huge part of the challenge. Right now, we're losing more affordable units per year than we are creating, because thousands and thousands, actually tens of thousands of units that were built with tax credit financing are finishing their tax credit terms and then being upgraded into mid-tier or upper tier housing and being redeveloped. And so we actually are going backwards at a time where the need is greater than ever. But I think it's clearly going to take subsidy, and we need to push for that both at the state level as well as the federal level. And then it's going to take mindset changes as well, which we've started to see, which is for people to understand that even if they have to pay marginally more up front, from a life cycle perspective, they're much better off having a highly energy efficient home. And I think the curve has really started to move on that the standard home, I think back when we started this 15 years ago, And really only rich people had green homes. It was a luxury item, and it wasn't viewed as a mainstream item. And I've been really delighted to see now that energy efficiency has become more mainstream. But as we talked about in the statistics, there's still an awful lot of inefficient housing out there, and insufficiently well-built housing. And if we can find ways to upgrade and make those houses safer and more energy efficient, that's great for the families. It's also great for society.
Thank you so much. And that is actually all the questions that we have listed for Q&A, but I thought of a couple questions through our conversation, and since we have a little more time, do you mind if I ask you those?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. So one thing that you mentioned as one of the most rewarding aspects of your job was being able to go out, get your hands dirty, and build those homes. Is there any experience that really stood out to you, kind of energized what you're doing, or a memorable experience that you got to share with a family or friend?
Yeah, I'm gonna take everyone a little far away just to set context, but I think one of my all-time favorite stories from an impact perspective was in Cambodia, and it was the first time I'd taken my youngest daughter with me to build, and we were building with a family that, when you think about deprivation, was living in conditions that were just beyond unacceptable. And so Soy Long was her name, and her husband died very sadly. They'd been living basically in a garbage dump, and even after her husband died, they couldn't afford the rent even for this tiny shack over a sewage pond, and they were literally on the streets. And we have a program for orphans and vulnerable groups. And through that, we were able to partner with Soy Lorng and build a very simple, one-room block house, and it was unbelievably hot. And we had almost finished the house. It was the last day we were going to do the dedication. We had just put the windows on, and Soy Long told me that the night before she had literally been standing up almost all night, just trying to hold the tarp that covered her mom and her two kids from tearing apart with their few possessions on the little lot where they were squatting, essentially. And a summer storm started rolling in. And so usually we do the dedication outside, but we asked in this case if we could go inside. And she welcomed us into her new home. And we came in, and the rain just started pouring down. And I just watched, and she was looking up and looking around the roof, and as was her mom. And I realized they were looking to see if the water was going to come in. And of course, having worked on building the house all week, I was looking a little nervously too. But no, the rain's pouring down, no water comes in, and and you could just see their shoulders just relaxed, and a little smile kind of broke out. And you realize, for the first time, they were going to be safe. They were going to have a door that locked. Their kids were going to be able to go to school. They would have access to affordable fresh water, as opposed to having to pay very high rates for dirty water. They're going to have proper sanitation for the first time. And you think about all the implications of that when we think about a house. And so it just drove home that a house is a whole lot more than four walls and a roof. It really is the foundation for so many of the other things we want in life. And I think it's those both relationships and stories, and what it means for the children who now have a chance to grow up and really grow into all that God intends, that keeps me doing this work.
That's fantastic. What a wonderful story. For anyone watching right now, what is something that they can do to help Habitat for Humanity, as well as help impact the availability of energy efficient and affordable housing, whether that's locally or internationally?
Well, we want everyone to get involved. It's always amazing to me how often housing gets left out of these critical conversations. And my hypothesis on that is that for most of us who grew up in good housing, we just take it for granted. We all see the value of health and education, but for those of us who have never experienced deprivation of housing, we don't see the devastating impact that has. And it's a little bit self-fulfilling, because most people in positions of political and economic power grew up in good housing. When you meet someone who didn't, they totally get this. So what we need from all of you is to become advocates for better housing for everyone, that to make the case that housing is that critical foundation for health, for education, for livelihoods, so that we can begin to say yes in my backyard. We have designed our communities and towns to be segregated economically and to hold people out. And we know the data is overwhelmingly clear that we need mixed income, mixed use communities. So I would encourage you, go to habitat.org. You can learn how to volunteer. Some of our volunteer work is constrained, but we look forward to the post-COVID era when our armies of volunteers can be back out in the community. But there are lots of ways other than construction to get involved. So you can become an advocate. You can donate to the cause, which we always welcome. And there are lots of ways you can get involved in your community, and we would love to see that. So please join us in aiming towards that world where everyone has a safe, decent, affordable place to live.
Jonathon, thank you so much. I cannot express how appreciative we are for the great work that you and your organization are doing. And we're so excited about the collaboration between both organizations. So thank you for taking time today to talk with us.
It's a pleasure, Emma. Thanks for having me.